Banjums. We are the Banjums. Come on, Rapid City. Come on, Rapid City. We are the Banjums. We are the Banjums. Come on, Rapid City. Come on, Rapid City. We are the Banjums. We are the Banjums. Come on, Rapid City. Come on, Rapid City. We are the Banjums. We are the Banjums.
Those are actually not the Trinity Bantam. It's some English football team, I think. But I'm sitting here with the Bantam-in-Chief right now. Daniel G. Lugo is Trinity College's 23rd president, recently installed in that capacity. And we're excited to get to spend. First of all, I should say that for the last 10 minutes, we've been talking about musicals, which I didn't see coming. And so this is another part of you. You have a little bit of background, I think, in intellectual property and entertainment law. And I know you saw Hamilton the last time through at the Bushnell, right?
Yeah. So all of the evidence was there. Colin, it's great to be on the show, and it was fantastic to talk a bit about musicals. And I appreciated the alignment that we had on a couple of our favorites, and we'll have healthy debates about a couple others.
We have a little bit of a Les Mis problem, but we're going to keep that private for a while. So I want to kind of begin with something that I think about a lot. And actually, I'll give you an example. So this morning I was walking, as I do, with a group of people, including my friend Olivia, who is an undergraduate at Holy Cross, and I said to her that I was going to be interviewing you, and then I said, what do you think college is for? What is college for, as far as you're concerned right now? And she's a very interesting young person, and she had two answers. She said one of them is it's kind of a liminal experience where you're leaving a situation where you live, typically anyway, people have been living at home. Suddenly they're spending 4 years someplace else, and that's kind of the threshold for entering the world where you will no longer live at home and you will seek your life elsewhere. And she said the other thing is, that although you have some electives in high school, this is the opportunity to pursue your curiosity. That's the word that she used, and I love that she used that. She said, I now can decide what I'm curious about, and then I can go find out things. And so those are two good answers, but I think there are a lot of answers to this question. And so what are your answers? What is college for in 2025?
I think those are really good answers, and for the most part, it's very much an American experience where, in cultures around the world, historically, there were these rite of passages that used to happen. And in the way things have evolved here in the United States, college has become somewhat of that rite of passage for certain parts of the community. And it's a very powerful one historically. And yes, that bridging that gap from adolescence to adulthood, getting that independence. And I talk about that with students who we're recruiting about. That is the proposition that we are offering to students when they're considering a place like Trinity. It is what happens, when you are surrounded by an intellectual community with experts in all of these fields. You have the opportunity to try out lots of different things and finally find what you are most passionate about, right, in a space where all things are done well. So I think that rite of passage is important. But I also think there's an accumulation of competencies, cognitive development, and skills that are very, very real at college when it's done best, when it's not a transactional thing.
But I think sometimes it is a transactional thing, and I think there's been growing pressure for it to be thought of that way. Since I graduated from college in 1976. Sure. I think at that time things like U.S. News and World Report's rankings didn't even probably exist, and that sort of idea that the value proposition really is to get you ready for a relatively comfortable life. And a job that, will support that comfortable life. It wasn't like it wasn't there. My parents really wanted me to go to Yale with, for a lot of those reasons. But that idea that obviously it's always going to be the case that the 4 years are really important. And then what comes out of the pipeline at the end of those 4 years is also going to be very important. But I don't know. I feel as though in the last 20, 30 years, that idea of what trickles out of the pipeline has gotten bigger and bigger compared to the actual 4 years.
Well, I think the expectations have grown and being accountable for those outcomes and those learning outcomes and those career outcomes. And but I still think at our core, the things that your parents wanted to happen for you in the 1970s, I think parents and families still want to happen for their children now, right? I do think that we want to ensure that they're able to, work in team environments. We want them to be able to think critically, to solve really complex problems, and to be able to communicate persuasively and to do all the things that, believe it or not, line up with what the types of workers that a whole wide range of industries want their new employees and new partners and associates to have.
Yeah, I mean, an example that I'll give you is one of my classmates at Yale, one of the people I graduated with, and one of my oldest and dearest friends is Mr. Karp. He's one of my oldest friends, but I don't really address him by his first name. He's way too important for that. But so he's a person who graduated from Yale in 3 years, Phi Beta Kappa and summa cum laude, went to Harvard Law School, and then over a period of time worked in sort of venture capital and investment and stuff like that, and has done extraordinarily well.
Sure.
But here's the thing about him. Every couple of days I get an envelope from Mr. Karp, and it is full of things that he has clipped out of the newspapers and magazines and heavily underlined in case I'm too stupid to figure out why this is important, which is entirely possible. And it's just an incredibly varied diet of information. Steve Kerr, the coach of the Golden State Warriors,
of course,
he had this thing where he asked the staff there to give him every day 5 articles that had nothing to do with basketball, because I think he thought, and I think Mr. Karp thinks, his decision-making process about basketball or about venture capital is not strictly informed by some kind of vocational training. But you're smiling about that.
I'm
you see where I'm going.
I see where you're going, but thank you. You are giving a
Yeah.
great advertisement for what we do in the liberal arts, right? We are actually inspiring curiosity and inspiring a mindset to learn and to take information from a diverse set of sources to help you in the process of discovery and to making best decisions for things that are more linear, but also to have leaps in thoughts, right? I love your story about Steve Kerr, right? Who's an ambassador kid. Dad was an ambassador in Lebanon, went to University of Arizona, obviously didn't only play basketball because he was inspired by his college experience. And that has helped him to be one of the best coaches in the history of the NBA. And I think that there are wonderful examples about that. I think education at its best does that. That's the type of education that I got at my alma mater, and that's the type of education that we provide at Trinity. And that's the type of inspiration for discovery that we provide at a place like Trinity.
And in a way, this isn't a new conversation. This is an old conversation. I mean, post-Civil War, really at Harvard, when Charles Eliot becomes the president of Harvard, and he sort of begins the idea of college to university, and he starts to say, no, some of this stuff needs to have some kind of utility. And I know you have ties to Franklin Marshall. I found the president of Franklin and Marshall at that time wrote that he was worried that the professional interest would prove a Jonah's whale. The humanities in the end will be swallowed up by the utilities. So that's a conversation that's going on like in 1870.
Right. And it hasn't happened yet, right?
But it's still, the tension is still there, right?
Yes, and maybe that's a good tension, right? And I think that tension allows for there to have an ebb and flow and a balance, and that debate is important. And I think there's a pendulum shifting. You're right that over the past decade or two, we've been much more outcomes oriented, much more transactional skill building focus. Mom and dad increasingly want folks to go code, go do things like that, but I think the pendulum is shifting back as we shift into a machine learning, AI-based society where the machines are going to do all of those things. So the humans are going to have to be, the expert on what that human experience is and provide that human expertise that is that experience of discovery and connecting the dots and making the best decisions.
Yeah, there's sort of a trust fall involved here. You're really saying, you got to believe me that reading John Stuart Mill and studying biology and you come up with another idea, and reading Flaubert and Wordsworth, that all of this can ultimately contribute to whatever the hell it is you're going to wind up doing 2, 3, 4 years from now. You just have to trust that some of this might or probably will inform who you are as a person.
Well, I think that's somewhat right, but I wouldn't go so far to call it a trust fall, because I think there's tremendous evidence, and we have to get back to telling those stories. And you just gave a wonderful example of it, of Steve Kerr, who this generation knows well as a multiple, championship ring holder and leading the dream team, and yet here's how he approaches being, the best coach in his field.
And I think you're right also that it's a pendulum that ticks and talks. I mean, when I was at Yale Kingman Brewster, having been through the Black Panther stuff, and all kinds of protests and stuff. And so I was there from 72 to 76, and he referred to this period as one of grim professionalism, which was not his lofty assessment of us. He sort of thought we were kind of boring because, we were there for a whole different set of reasons. And so that was in the 70s. And so in a way, it's the same conversation now.
I think that's a great point. I think it's an absolutely great point.
Why is anybody here right now? How about you? You had a whole other career. You were a lawyer and you were doing IP stuff and entertainment stuff. And so how did you wind up over in academia?
Yeah, I think it's very much a great extension of our earlier conversation and the power of the liberal arts. I got a great transformative, discovery-based, multidisciplinary-based liberal arts education, and yet I was pretty obsessed with becoming an attorney at a certain point in my life, and really barreled ahead and pursued that. Went to the University of Minnesota, came out, went back to New York, got in, as you mentioned, to intellectual property, transactional law. Wanted to provide service to creative folks, to athletes, because I had some adjacencies to people who did that for a career. And when I got there, I discovered that it actually wasn't satisfying enough. It wasn't waking me up in the morning feeling like I actually wanted to do something much more positive for the world. And by the way, I hadn't learned to that point that was even important to me, right? I was very financially motivated in my career choices. And once I discovered that, I took, another moment of learning and discovery and taking information from lots of different sources and people. And I determined that the experience that I had at my undergraduate college was one that I wanted to be a part of, providing for thousands of others. And 22 years ago, made that choice to shift industries. And so it was the liberal arts that were kind of inculcated in me to give me that sense of not being satisfied with just the remuneration of what my first plan was. But also gave me the confidence that I could have chosen to do whatever I wanted because I knew how to learn and I would figure it out. So that's how I kind of think about my transition, and it's worked out pretty well.
Every time you say that thing about satisfied, I get "You'll never be satisfied" from Hamilton rocketing through my head. So
absolutely.
So maybe say, and obviously you're still pretty new and fresh on campus.
Yeah.
But that whole idea of learning how to learn,
right? How
do you see that happening in real time and on a college campus?
Well, I mean, it's happening constantly, right? Primarily, it happens in the classroom because we have experts who know how to bring that out, and it happens in our classrooms not only because of the experts, but because of the style of learning that we have. I'm biased for a certain style of education that is intimate, that's small classroom based, and I think is proximate to what you do in the real world, right? You get together with 12, 15 folks, you wrestle with tough topics, you're required to weigh in, and you have an expert, right, in the room. On our campus, it's our distinguished and incredible faculty, and in the workplace, it's a boss. Sometimes the boss isn't as smart as our faculty, let's just put it like that. But you get that experience of where that expert looks at you and said, hey, in light of the data, in light of what we read, what's your opinion on it? And you have to, that process of learning is not transactional, is not linear, and it is a discovery-based approach that everyone's learning and growing simultaneously. So it's happening in the classroom, but then it's happening all over campus, right? We're learning how the conversations continue in the dorm rooms, how they continue on the quad, where we're also learning at how folks are developing lots of competencies and confidence and communication and performance in the arts and in creativity with the visual arts and in the teamwork and leadership that happens in our athletics experiences. And in a small environment where the people that do all of those talent-based things are your friends and are your roommates, there's a lot of, cross-pollination of how that benefits our community.
Yeah, I just gave a speech in late October at the University of St. Joseph. Well, I think it was called "We Can't Have Nice Quadrangles Anymore," or can we? But about the idea of the quadrangle as, in fact, this kind of symbol going back to Oxford in the 13th century and probably Bologna around the same time. You have this place. It's a space where, Franciscan friars who are geniuses are walking around talking to students and, they were probably throwing frisbees too, or whatever they had back then.
Yeah.
Pie plates. But that idea that here's a space, and it's a little bit of an enclave too. There's a sense that you have a little bit of peace away from some of the encroachments of the world while you go through this gestation. To me, it's still an incredibly powerful idea that we're going to have this space where that's what we're going to do. We're going to learn stuff, and we're going to learn about how to learn stuff.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's has to be a commitment going forward in the future, right? So one of the big disruptions that everyone's concerned about or excited about, depending on where you stand, right, is this evolution of technology and how it can quite effectively, right, drive the acquisition of content, right, and to some degree skills. But what it doesn't do is this, what we're talking about, and that will not ever be approximated by some online experience that you're going to have through your iPad.
When in the 80s, I was teaching nonfiction writing at Trinity, and one of the things I would do is I would take my students. They all wanted to write these sort of deeply felt personal essays about, how they'd been wronged in some way. And so I would do, one day I took them to the Jacobs Life Sciences Center, and I said, I want you to spend the next 40 minutes walking around this place and asking people questions so that you can write something about this. Just ask people questions about what you're seeing and what they're doing. And they looked at me like I was out of my freaking mind. Like, this is not how you become a writer. And then they came back and they were so excited.
Right.
Because they'd asked a whole bunch of questions and they'd found, lizards doing weird things in some lab or something. But it does take a little bit of that shift. Just open yourself up a little bit to stuff.
Yeah, and how do you provoke and inspire successful moments of discovery, right? And I think that was obviously a brilliant way to do that.
I don't know about brilliant, but
that's pretty good. It's pretty good. But when it happens, right, you get a little bit addicted to that serotonin kind of injection. Oh wow, that actually worked, and what could happen as I expand my skill sets and do that more regularly, and the power of observation, right, which is again, in a online-based thing, which is immediate and transactional, is absolutely critical to being, a leader, to being an intelligent, functioning citizen of our society. But it takes time, right? Yeah. It takes curation.
Was there a person, either in your undergraduate days or could have been late in high school, it could have been later, who really stood out to you as the kind of person who said, "Hey, Dan, it's a big world out there," and or who just who gave you the appetite that you pretty clearly have for learning?
I think that there were stops along the way. I'm a first generation college attender and the youngest of four in my family. And for whatever reason, while my older siblings didn't go to college, I never knew that it was possible for me not to go to college, right? So no one knew where I was going, but I was going. And so there was always encouragement from my parents, from my mother in particular, to discover new things, right? And to be open to new possibilities, right? When a particular orchestra teacher in my hometown said, "Hey Dan, I think you could be a good string bass player." I really didn't understand why, but it was my mom that said, "Here's a guy that actually wants to teach you something, so follow that." And what happened out of that opened quite a number of doors for me to grow. And I think in high school there were folks like that, and definitely there were folks at Carleton that expected more of me, that encouraged me to go beyond the transaction of learning, but to be curious. But I do think that some of it, sometimes we also, create this expectation that everyone, right, has to have this motivation, right? And I'm not saying that is true, right? It would be great to stimulate that in as many people as possible, and there are some folks that don't even know that they have it in them. And I was one of those kids that I discovered that I was a very curious person, and hence from early success in being, stimulated to chase that passion, I've done that all my life.
Wait a minute, did you end up playing bass?
Yeah, I was a string bass player.
Really?
Yeah.
Are you aware that there's a jazz bass player in Connecticut named Henry Lugo?
I did not know that.
Yeah. No, and we know him pretty well too. Yeah, you guys got to get together. You got to you got to go Lugo on Lugo here with a little bass challenge.
Well, he still plays, and I have an instrument, but don't play very often.
Well, that may change. All right, we're going to grab a quick break here. We are talking to Daniel G. Lugo, Trinity College's 23rd president. We will be back.
I'm 2 days into college and I'm 3 lectures behind. There's this guy, let's name him Colin. He says he wants to be mine, but it doesn't really sit with me quite right, cause he doesn't really like the things I like, and I keep accidentally locking myself out of my dorm in the middle of the night. I wake up kinda wired and I wake up kinda cold, and I wake up kinda tired, but I'll just sleep in when I'm old. See, I don't like breaking rules, but don't like doing as I'm told, so I just float around and keep my head down and hope my life unfolds. And everybody's telling me that I'm doing so well. I try to trust them honestly.
So we have here with us a college president who probably has students who fit that description, and it's Daniel G. Lugo. He is the fairly new president of Trinity College. So when we first started talking about doing this show with you, I said to Lily Tyson, this is like, I have sort of like, we all have sort of job envy, every once in a while I'll think, I could probably be a better U.S. senator than 75 of those people. And it would be fun too. I don't have that about your job. I think being a college president right now has got to be one of the hardest jobs. It just feels like you are under a lot of pressure from a lot of different competing constituencies, and that the days would be, I used to say this to your predecessor, Joanne, say, I do not want this job. I don't know how you do it. So why would this be attractive to you?
Well, I've heard of that from a few folks. And I think there are some accuracies to that sense of it being a hard job, but there are lots of hard jobs out there that are fantastic. And I would say being a college president is a hard job. If you're looking for a job that isn't hard, don't become a college president. But if you're looking for a job that is hard, but you actually get to make some really, really important and consequential impacts on communities, on students, on the fields of academics, it's a very rewarding job. And so you got to take the upside with that. And I'm sure there's a calmer job that I could have. And I'm sure there are less demanding jobs. But that doesn't mean that they're less fun, right? That doesn't mean that they're less rewarding. So, yeah, it is a hard job.
I think there's hard jobs and there's hard jobs.
Sure.
I think what makes this job kind of difficult is that, well, I'll give an example. And this is something, I don't expect you to comment on this. In fact, I think no comment would be a smart thing. But just maybe comment on just how you have to work something like this out. So there's a letter in the Trinity Tripod from about 15 to 17 faculty members who identify as Jewish, who are actually upset with you because of chalkboard messages that were expressing sympathy with the Palestinian cause. And they actually are siding with the chalkboard messages. And there's something about how you handled it that I don't even understand that they don't like. But I was reading about that, and I was also thinking, on the other hand, the Trump administration has decided to use anti-Semitism as kind of a crowbar, for an argument for defunding and doing all kinds of punitive stuff. So that's why I wouldn't want your job, because at this point you really have swords pointing at you from a lot of different directions.
Yeah, well, I think without commenting on that active scenario, I would say that what is at play there is that there are multiple constituencies, and that's always been true. And you stand at the nexus, right? You are the translator between the day-to-day experience to the fiduciary and steward, right, of the long-term success of the institution. And oftentimes those things are in tension. You stand at the nexus of faculty and staff and students and alumni and the board of trustees. And so, there's quite a bit of art and challenge and politics in navigating those waters.
You probably read Emma Green's piece on the New Yorker on the Trump administration's kind of ramping up to mess around with higher education, and it's a much more coordinated, multi-agency effort, I think, than I had even understood prior to reading that piece. But there was a line in there that kind of jumped out at me. It was a guy from Rick Hess from the American Enterprise Institute, AEI, and he said a decade ago, higher education was an away game for Republicans, and I know what he meant because I've taught enough at both Trinity and at Yale, where I've said to my seminar classes, if we have some conservatives in here, that's really great, because we need that. We need to have that kind of conversation. So if people say stuff that maybe bothers you, just roll with it, because I don't want the conservatives feeling, because if there's 18 of us and there's maybe 3 conservatives, I don't want them shutting up. But I don't know, is Trinity a slightly different animal? This is a college that produced George Will, Tucker Carlson, and Jesse Waters. There's the Shelby Davis Fund there that is a free enterprise endowment at Trinity. I mean, I think Trinity has maybe had a reputation for being perhaps a little bit more politically, ideologically diverse, but that's an outsider's perspective.
Yeah, and I probably have that same perspective, and I'm learning more about whether that's actually true. I think it should be our goal to have a community that not only reflects the broader universe, because that is how we learn best and how we learn from each other, and there's a certain amount of cross-pollination that's needed for us to actually become even more rational in where our decisions and our opinions actually truly end up. So we hope that there's some healthy representation from conservative backgrounds as well as progressive backgrounds, and I don't think we have a census of that, and I share your sense and how you taught that you were hopeful that we weren't a place that was exclusionary of folks with a whole wide range of political philosophies and backgrounds.
What's been kind of interesting too, in a not necessarily positive way, watching what's happened in the last year, is that sometimes because of these perceived, or in my view, kind of, pardon the expression, pardon the pun, trumped up ideas that some college is doing something, like the main university system is doing something wrong ideologically,
right.
That science money winds up, in that Emma Green piece, there was a guy who runs the tick lab, nobody likes ticks. Everybody hates ticks. You want some good science on ticks, and it's suddenly being defunded, and that's got to be a little bit scary too. The idea that something that has no ideological real content. There isn't an ideology about ticks or, clams or...
I think it's very concerning.
Yeah.
I think it's absolutely very concerning, and why we shouldn't have the government doing political litmus tests on funding for schools, nor should we should be very, very concerned about efforts of the federal government leaning into the autonomy of American colleges and universities. The American model of higher education has worked really, really well. We are the envy of the world. And how do we have evidence of that? There's plenty of documentation that the best universities are here. There's clear evidence that people vote with their seats and with their feet and their money. They come here for education, right? So I think part of our success in having that truly exceptional position in the world market is because of the autonomy of colleges and universities, and we are risking that exceptional position with I think a lot of the mucking about that's happening in these funding choices that are arbitrary and that are politically based.
Yeah, I was thinking about that last night and thinking about how, obviously college is very expensive here in the U.S. or certainly can be. And then you look at other countries and I don't know, I'm sure in Sweden, college is way less expensive because for the most part, it's funded by the government and the healthcare of all the professors and all the other people who work at the college is funded by the president. So there's a trade-off, right? There's a trade-off which is we have a different model. We certainly have state universities, but we also have colleges like Trinity where the tuition is going to be high. And I'm assuming that and correct me if I'm wrong about this, that one of the ways you think about that is, but if it was all state funded, there'd be some kind of independence and innovative spirit and creativity that might get lost in all that. That these, the private colleges are ultimately, because they are independent, a laboratory for all kinds of thinking. GLP-1 drugs come from studying the saliva of Gila monsters. Who knew? They weren't looking for a diabetes and weight loss drug. They were just studying monsters. Yeah,
that's the culture of discovery, right? That happens from autonomy and not having a completely linear argument about why this particular process or opportunity, right, is the way it is. And I've traveled around the world and I love visiting universities and I love talking to colleagues that work at international universities and folks that have graduated from international. It's a totally different experience, right? It is in many other countries, the toughest part of education is actually going through that secondary school, right? And then college is somewhat of a, for lack of a better way of thinking about it, right? Just almost like a crowning achievement, and very discipline based, right? You focus on one thing, right? Where we pursue things a little bit differently at certain types of schools. But I love the diversity of what American higher education provides. I'm a huge fan of growing our community college-based systems, which are very, very accessible, which create real great outcomes for folks and their families and their communities that fuel the workforce, which I think is actually an important part of American higher education, and we need not to shy away from. We actually need to equip the American workforce. But that broad range of institutions is a part of why we're so successful. And the autonomy of research universities and private independent colleges is a part of that ecosystem.
So you said before you're the first member of your family to go to college. College is really expensive. I mean, it is. $75,000 is, whatever. It's a lot of money. Can you tell me a little bit about how you think about that when you're thinking about, thinking about the equivalent of Dan Lugo, but one who's maybe 17, 18 years old right now.
Yeah, I always think of the equivalent of people that come from backgrounds and communities like mine. One, college is worth it. Whether you go to community college, you go to a four-year state institution, you go to a private college. The earnings premium shows that, right? Whether it's 60 to 80%, more compensation valuable on an annual basis versus a high school education, or if it's the $1 million to $2 million premium that you get over a lifetime, the BA, right? And then I think about how strong the value proposition is for a place like Trinity, which is where I'm accountable for those outcomes. And we have an incredible diverse array of demonstrating the value of what is an expensive and premium education. If everything was designed right for maximum efficiency, the places that do the discovery best would cease to have those types of styles of learning, right? It is more efficient to educate people in a classroom of 400 people with monitors and TAs, but does that stimulate discovery? Right? Which is an incredibly important part of American higher education, incredibly important part of actually our economy. You just talked about one example of it, right? Yeah. That culture of discovery, of freedom to pursue things, maybe in not the most efficient way, but what happens along the way is accretive and valuable to society, to business, to the world, and to forward progress. So having, again, a diverse array of types of schools for different types of expectations and outcomes is a part of why we are the envy of the world and what we should continue to invest in.
You know, we're the envy of the world. On the other hand, internally, you've probably seen the Gallup polls that say that increasingly Americans don't think college is very important, that a college education is very important. The numbers the last 15 years has really dipped down. And is part of it that there aren't enough conversations like the one we're having right now? The colleges aren't telling their story.
Yeah.
Is that part of it?
I think I think that is part of it. And some of the onus, and I'm very much not a fan of being a victim, right? Mm-hmm. We have to take that on better. Mm-hmm. And I think we need to talk without violating antitrust, more as an industry, right? Like a car industry would, right? We are an industry that adds tremendous value to the world and to our society and to our economy, and we don't really articulate that well. We've just gone through a period of time where some of the most incredible institutions in the world have just been bashed and tarred and feathered, and I've yet to see the strong counter narrative of the transformative ways that they have moved society for the better for all of us, right? So that's on us. We have to do that better. But I do think that there's everything in investing in K through 12 infrastructure. There's everything in making our society much more quantitatively strong. There's everything in our society of information literacy, so that every time you see a tweet of a man bites dog story, right, about there's one particular person that took out $250,000 of debt to be a cosmetologist, right, doesn't mean that that's the norm or what's typical for folks that invest in themselves and get a great college education. So I think there's a lot of mythology that without great information literacy sits out there and is corrosive, right, to the reputation of American higher education.
That's a very good answer to that question. And we are talking to the new president of Trinity College, Dan Lugo. We're going to take a little break. We got one more segment to come up after this. We can talk a little bit about life in Hartford, too, what he's learning about the place where he works. And I got some people to thank today. That would include the maestro, Dylan Reyes, our technical producer today. Lily Tyson Quality Entertainment Productions has made this possible. They've also got their new Gilmore Girls thing. Gilmore Generation? Is that what it's called? Generation Gilmore. I should learn. See, I'm going to have my pay doc because I said that wrong. And so anyway, Lily Tyson's the producer of this episode. Our wonderful boss, Robin Doyen-Aiken, is running around making sure things happen in a very humanistic way. And so thanks to all of those wonderful people. I'm so lucky to work where I work. And Daniel G. Lugo is also very lucky to work where he works. He's Trinity College's 23rd president, even though I said I wouldn't take that job. I want to talk to you a little bit about, kind of go back to where we began, or particularly even before the show started. Culture is really important to you. Culture broadly construed is really important to you. And so it seems as though, as you are here in Hartford, one of the things you want to learn is, what does that mean around here?
Yeah, I think that's right. And that I think is another byproduct of a good liberal arts education, is how do you learn about new communities and identify cultural, alignment, or seek out difference, encounter difference, value difference, and we're so. One of the most attractive parts of coming to Trinity is to be here in Hartford, and we live over on Vernon Street, and so we are here, and that is our home, and it's a city with such a tremendous history. It's a city with so many advantages, whether it's location, transportation, you name it, right? Just a great cultural scene here that I am really excited to find ways for me to personally lean into and to build on the strength that my predecessors have created in connecting Trinity to Hartford. And together with a really, really bright Mayor Arun Arulampalam, an amazing array of great community-based organizations and revitalization zone leaders, I think that Hartford is really primed to knit together a strategy and a way forward where Hartford's next renaissance, next best days are ahead of us.
Are you aware that Arun is a musician too?
I am. Yeah. And what a singer, man.
He's a really good singer. And I know Arun really well. And I've known him, I think, since he was in law school, maybe. There's another, another part of the multiverse,
right,
where Arun Arulampalam now has 5 or 6 albums out, and he's not mayor of Hartford.
No kidding. Yeah.
and his predecessor Luke Bronin actually did record an album.
Oh my gosh.
One of his songs was used on Dawson Creek. So we have very musical mayors here.
No kidding. I didn't know that was a requirement.
Well, it may become one anyway. And I do think Hartford has a similar problem to what we were talking about in the previous segment. Hartford's not that good at telling its own story either. And I actually think right there on your street, that School for the Performing Arts, part of the learning corridor there, is a remarkable thing that the average person who lives in Connecticut doesn't know anything about.
Sure.
And I'm going to be working with 2 of their graduates on Thursday night who are amazing jazz musicians. And that whole idea of Hartford is it's a city of neighborhoods, it's a city of ethnicities, it's a city of a lot of different cultures, which is both exciting, but I think also a little paralyzing for the city. The city seems to still struggle with how to tell that story and how to make the most of it.
Well, I can't say that I'm expert in that, and I'll take your word for that. And if we can identify that as a problem, I love that, because then we can solve that. The storytelling isn't hard, right? Yeah. I think there's a fantastic story to tell about the advantages of Hartford, and I think that there are lots of incredible, young people, young families, retirees that are looking for the type of city that Hartford is, with that vibrancy, with that cultural diversity, with that culinary, diversity, and everything that's here. We need to address things like housing, right? We need to address things like infrastructure, but those things are finite. And with a great strategy and some collective energy, it's not a gigantic place. So it should not feel like moving the tide in a positive direction is inconceivable.
Yeah, and I wonder how you feel about the way Trinity fits into the city. Because of where it is and I think I've watched this now for decades and decades and decades. Trinity has kind of an ongoing conversation. How much of a part of Hartford are we? What are the connections? How do we connect? How do we connect to downtown Hartford? How do we, and maybe say a little bit about how you see that, because I think every Trinity president has to think this thing through in a very particular way.
Yeah, and I think that's right. And it's my understanding that at least my previous three predecessors collectively thought leaning into the connection of Hartford was an important thing in the modern era of Hartford. And when you think of the extremes, right? Okay, can Trinity disconnect from Hartford? That's impossible, right? There's no way to physically do it. There's no way to reputationally do it. It is an impossible thing to do. So we actually have to embrace that, right? That we are tied, and that's a wonderful thing. That's been a wonderful thing throughout history. I talked a decent amount about that with the mayor, with the governor. I talked about it in my inauguration, that we are tied at the hip. We are an important community in Hartford and important part of our history, right? From becoming a capital city, from moving from where the capital is to, our high point in the city of where we are now. And in every, a moment of importance, we need to be at the table and shaping the future of Hartford.
I wonder also, just getting people who on campus who are not part of the Trinity educational community. I mean, I don't know what you're saying, but when I go to Cine Studio these days, I first of all don't see enough people there. I think that story
isn't that a shame?
Yeah,
oh my
it's
gosh!
Really a shame.
Talk about one of our most prized assets, and I know I'm biased because I'm an entertainment guy. I love cinema and film. But I sometimes pinch myself the fact that right there on our campus is this really fantastic art house, a cinema that I've probably watched 5 movies there so far, and I feel bad that it's not 10 because I've missed some really, really great films. Yeah, and we need to support the promotion of that, and we have an important role to play in the city by inviting people to that very, very important resource.
Yeah, and maybe also get them to stay. Go over to have a cup of coffee over there, or wherever that place is. But yeah, I mean, first of all, we should say that James Hanley, one of the co-creators of Cine Studio, is such an important part of this show that he's still on from Zurich.
Oh wow!
We can't quit James because he's so wonderful. But yeah, and I just sort of wish that people from the suburbs would go to something at the Austin Arts Center and would maybe have dinner at Billings Forge and then go down to your place and then maybe stay on campus afterward to do something else. That's what you want, right?
Yep.
You want you don't want to be a city on a hill. You want to be a city in the city.
No, the more we are connected to the city and not isolated amongst ourselves, and seen as a destination that works in concert with all of these other great institutions, the better it is for Trinity and the better it is for Hartford. And but the fact, all of those things that you mentioned, I believe are actually achievable with modest resources and modest effort. So they're still there to do.
Yeah. Well, it's an exciting time to be a college president, and you seem remarkably, I don't know what medications you're taking, but I want some of them because you seem very calm and upbeat.
I don't know what you're putting in the water,
Yeah,
but the mug is beautiful.
Yeah, you can't have the mug. Sorry about that. We have a limited supply. So, Daniel Lugo, thank you so much. I'm very excited now that I have a chance to meet you. I'm very excited about your tenure. I think this is going to be an exciting time, and I can't wait to see what else you do.
Awesome. Well, thank you for having me on, Colin, and I'll be a loyal listener in the future and look forward to coming back.
You're going to be too busy to listen to the radio. Let's not kid ourselves. All right, and thanks to all the rest of you for listening. Thanks to my great team.
Be there to say that I don't need to take their stupid test. Greet me with banners and balloons, and my hard drive smashed to pieces. Nothing left for me to save when I write my master's thesis. It's all gonna change when I write my master's thesis.